Great.
Alrighty, hello, welcome everybody. My name is Can. I'm here with Lyngso, and we have Lisa and Kathleen Putnam from Master Gardeners. They're going to be doing a fantastic talk today on tomatoes. This class is being recorded and will be available under community resources on Lyngso's page. So look forward to that, hopefully tomorrow. And then if you have any questions, feel free to send them in via chat. And that's it for my spiel. So let's have Lisa and Kathleen take over. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa, that's Kathleen, and we're both master gardeners. Kathleen's also an ISA certified arborist, and her love is fruit trees and soil, and my love is soil.
And cover cropping.
And cover cropping. We do a lot of cover cropping. And I just tried to stop sharing because can you guys see this meeting is being recorded?
No.
On this?
No.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm hoping that everything works. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. We know it's been 3 years on Zoom, so we appreciate you joining us. Okay, here we go. So why grow tomatoes? It's the most beloved crop in the country. And if you're going to grow one thing, it seems like people grow tomatoes. And I think that it's because they taste so good. You know, when they're homegrown and they're ripe off the vine, they're delicious. And when you get them in the store, they kind of taste like cardboard. So I think that's why people grow tomatoes. Kathleen and I have been growing tomatoes for many, many years, but we are by no means an expert in this. We're experienced, but not an expert. And I just want to say all the photos today are tomatoes that I have grown, and I've been growing in Woodside, which is in Central Peninsula, Mid-Peninsula, for about 16 years. And before that, I lived in Mill Valley and I grew tomatoes there, lived in Sacramento, grew tomatoes there. So I've grown tomatoes in a few different places. And Kathleen, how about you?
San Francisco and Santa Cruz. So I've had the weather challenges more than you have as far as heat.
Yeah, heat and coastal influences.
Yeah.
So what we're going to cover today is what are the best conditions to have tomatoes thrive, seeding, picking out seedlings, caring for them, pruning, fertilize or don't fertilize, how to clone a tomato, how to trellis a tomato, and then some recipes since the class is called From Seed to Salsa. And those are some tomatoes I grew, and you can see it's called cat facing on that big one. And you know, that doesn't bother me. That's just an environmental factor, and it doesn't bother me. I eat that tomato just fine. I don't know, Kathleen, if you have anything to add to that.
No, and I mean, some tomato varieties are much more prone to it than others. And I mean, it's just, that's what happens when you grow your own.
Yeah, and those are almost everything there, I think, is an heirloom tomato. So what does a tomato need to thrive? Sun is probably the number one thing. And Kathleen and I teach a lot of vegetable classes, but it needs a minimum of 8 hours of full sun, which means sun hitting the leaves, not dappled, not, full sun. And it's better with more. I mean, this time of year, the sun's up by whatever, 5:30, and it's still light at 8:30. So we have 15 hours of sun. I mean, that's ideal. That's probably nobody's situation, but the more, the better. Living soil, Kathleen will be getting into that a little bit later on in the talk, what constitute living soil. Water is important, and doing it correctly is important. So it's consistent water. That doesn't mean daily water. That just means consistent water, and having it get a little dry between the waterings. We've had such a cool May and such a cool June you probably haven't had to put much water on your tomatoes. So it's more the consistency than it is. Oh, I don't, maybe you have a better way of saying it, Kathleen, than the frequency. I mean, you don't want to put a ton of water on tomatoes because you're just leaching out all your nitrogen. So you don't want to pour tons and tons of water on them. Right now, I'm watering twice a week, about, well, in the cool weather it was 15 minutes, but we've increased that to 30 minutes. Kathleen, how about you on the coast?
You know, I'm doing it every 4 days for about 15 minutes.
Okay.
And, you know, I mulch really heavily, so I don't use as much water as a lot of people.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that every 4 days is more important. And, you know, the time is obviously going to vary with the season, but it's like every 4 days.
Yeah.
That plant knows it's going to get water. And the same is true of citrus, just to throw that out there.
Yeah. And you know what? We don't talk a lot about mulching, but mulching is really, really important with tomatoes. And we can get into that when we get into the disease section. So,
Oh, you didn't do supports?
oh, and then we'll go through how to trellis and support your tomatoes. Or if you don't want to, you don't have to, but it's a real mess if you don't.
And how not to fertilize. We're going to talk about that too.
Yeah. So this is actually, this is from, we teach a lot of vegetable gardening classes. The couple things I want you to notice is, well, first, I'd really like it if you would memorize this slide because this slide has it all. But so your warm stuff likes it between 65 and 85, your cool stuff between 55 and 75. Almost everything you grow in the cool seasons, which is your fall, winter, spring crops, all of those are actually vegetables. And because you're eating the vegetative part of the plant. What you're growing in summer, your warm season stuff, there's really only 4 families. And it's the Solanaceae family, the nightshade tomatoes, your cucurbits, corn, and your beans. And those are the only things you can grow in the summertime. That'll be the reason why that's important to know is when we get to the disease section. And we'll also cover anything below 55, your tomatoes might not set fruit. Anything over 90, you're going to run into disease problems and the tomatoes kind of going kaput.
And they won't set fruit either.
Yeah, they won't set fruit on either extreme, on the cold extreme or the hot extreme. So, all right. We wanted to cover some definitions. Kathleen, you want to do definitions?
Yeah, heirloom is in not mythology, but in most people think of heirlooms as something that's been passed down from generation to generation or brought over by their ancestors to America. But the true definition of an heirloom is anything that's 50 years or older, open pollinated, it can reproduce itself. Hybrid is like sun gold, everybody's favorite little cherry is a cross-pollinated. I actually don't know the parents of sun gold, but its mom and its dad are 2 different varieties, and they've crossed them, the pollen, physically done it, and the seeds from that will not be true. It won't make another sun gold. Indeterminate, it's going to grow forever and become huge and crazy. And determinate, it's going to set its fruit faster, but it's not going to grow very big. And then when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And all heirloom varieties are open pollinated, but not all open pollinated varieties are heirlooms.
Yeah.
I love that line.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, I can't remember, but just put them in the Q&A, and at the end we'll go ahead and answer questions. How and why to seed. I mean, some of the nice things about growing your own seedlings is there's just so many varieties. I don't know how many varieties, but certainly hundreds of different varieties of tomatoes. So you might really love Cherokee Purple or Paul Robeson, or, maybe some tomatoes that you can't find in the nursery. So it's nice. Also, you start the seedlings and you can have them. I start my seedlings end of February. I plant them out as 6-week-old seedlings, mid to late April, sometimes beginning of May. So you get your correct timing, because a lot of the big box stores, the seedlings start showing up in February. Well, we still have frost in February, so you don't want to be putting your tomatoes out till April 15th. I always think after tax day is you're safe, usually after tax day, but not always. About 2 years ago,
Yeah, we had a frost.
like April 18th. So so end of April, beginning of May, that's when you want to be putting your seedlings in.
And even if we don't have a frost, if it's cold or chilly, I should say, the tomato's just going to sit there.
Yeah.
And there's really no point. It's open to disease and insects. And so just wait until it's warm.
Yeah. And you do get more disease when a tomato plant's sitting in cold soil. Yeah, you're kind of asking for problems. Hey, Kathleen, so this is the sun gold that I grew a few years ago. You want to, I'm
Yeah.
always growing sun golds.
So if you look on the very bottom one on the left, you can see a little crack. There's a new variety called Sun Sweet, which is supposed to taste just like a sun gold, but not so prone to cracking. Sun golds crack, they just do. So I'm actually at a client's. I put a sun gold and a sun sweet next to each other, and we're gonna see which one's better.
Yeah. And then I forgot to mention that tomato on the left of your screen. So I try really hard never to buy tomatoes from the store. This was a winter purchase tomato, so probably a greenhouse grown tomato. And it sat on my kids wanted it for whatever. But so it sat on the counter forever and ever. And then I finally cut it open, and it had germinated. I don't know. I think that's what's going on. That's the only thing that makes sense. But anyway, it was so ugly that I thought I had to put it in there. That tomato I did not grow, but all the other slides are tomatoes that I grew, but not that guy. All right, seedlings and buying seedlings. I would just say tomato seedlings are the same as any other seedlings you're buying. You don't want them to be root bound. You don't want them spindly, like they were looking for light. You want a nice, compact, sturdy little plant. You can just pop them out if you're buying 4-inch, pop them out, look at the roots, make sure they're not root bound. And just to mention the Master Gardeners, we do have a spring garden market every year in April. I mean, the nice thing about the spring garden market for Master Gardeners, this year it was April 15th. It's always mid-April. So it's at the exact time that you need those seedlings. You bring them home and I have everything on hand that you need to plant them out, and go ahead and plant them out. So I always like the timing of that. And if you buy seedling, if you know you have something going on with your soil, if you know you have verticillium or fusarium, or Kathleen, you can talk a little bit in a minute about tobacco mosaic virus, but then buy seedlings that are resistant. So you can see like Super Sweet 100, they're resistant to verticillium and fusarium. One that's a celebrity hybrid is resistant to absolutely everything. And Beefmaster hybrid, Better Boy. So if you've had problems with disease with your tomatoes, you're going to be better off buying a seedling, which are going to be hybrids. You're probably going to pay a little bit more. You'd certainly pay more for the seeds than an open pollinated, but it might be worth it if you've got a problem in your soil. So,
and it's not 100%. I mean, if you have a huge load of verticillium in your soil and you plant a resistant, I mean, it's resistant. It's not 100%.
proof. Yeah, it's not like waterproof. It's like watches or, iPhones. They're not waterproof, but they're water resistant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's some resistance. And
Uh,
tobacco mosaic virus is if you smoke or use tobacco products and get those on your hand, get the juice of it on your hand, and then handle anything in the Solanaceae family, you can transmit a disease to it.
So wash your hands really well if you're a smoker.
Yeah, like soap and water well.
Yeah. Okay, good. And yeah, I don't know if we get into hygiene, but I'm starting now for the first time. I'm going to be cleaning my tools, just isopropyl alcohol or bleach, and clean your tools between plants, especially if you see something going on with that plant. So let's talk about sowing seeds. It's actually really easy. It's easier than it sounds. Those are little fuzzy tomato seeds. To me, those look like an open pollinated seed that somebody saved and put on a little paper towel. Those aren't seeds that I have saved, but I grow my stuff in a 72 tray, which you'll see in the next slide. And it has 12 rows in it of 6 cells each. I put one seed per cell, but there's plenty of people who do a very dense planting, like they would put 10 seeds in each cell to save room. And I mean, I get it, but I mean, I'm even with just one tray, I'm growing 72 seedlings. And I'm right now I'm growing out at the garden farm about 42 different tomatoes. So I don't even need the 72. So that's more than enough. But I want usually more than 12 varieties. So I usually at least do a couple of trays of tomatoes. We'll get into seeding mix, but this year I didn't use any peat products, or peat moss products. So I actually, Terry at Lyngso has helped me. I got some pit moss for me, which is a paper product. Some Linga, what's the name of that, Kathleen? Linga peat.
Oh,
Yeah.
the peat
Yeah, it's not real peat, but
or
it's not core. I have a, I think I have
Peat?
Can you say that again, Can?
Lignapete?
Yeah, lignapete. I tried that and the pit moss, and I had some super composted horse manure. And I started some tomatoes and broccoli at the same time. Now the broccoli loved the horse manure starting mix. I also mixed it in with verticillium and not
verticillium.
no, sorry, vermiculite and perlite, and some compost. And the brassicas loved the horse manure. The tomatoes hated it. So it was just interesting. So anyway, I just put the little seeds on top. Then I usually put a little bit of soil on top. I bottom water it. I put into a huge tray, water it from the top until it's several inches in the tray so it can soak up. Then I cover it with the inside of a cereal box, like Cheerios box, and I put it on bottom heat. And this year, they germinated right away. They germinated like in 2 days, which I wasn't expecting. I went out of town for the weekend and I came back, and not only had they germinated, they were looking for light, and I still had the plastic cover on them. So new seed can germinate in 2 or 3 days. Older seed is going to take a little bit longer. So, but kind of going away for the weekend isn't the best thing to do after you've seeded your tomatoes. And then, so after they come up, you take that plastic off. This year, in the past, I've used these shop lights, fluorescent shop lights. You can't buy them anymore. I don't know why they stopped making them. So when I used to grow tomatoes, I had just tons and tons of these shop lights, and I moved 5 years ago and I gave them all away. And now I wish I wouldn't have, because now you have to use LED lights. And you want light on them about 12 hours. So if it's a sunny day, you could just go ahead and put them out. And if it's not sunny, you're gonna have to have lights on them. And I'm not good yet at the LED lights, so I just need to perfect that. And hardening off, after those little seedlings are looking good, you just bring them outside, maybe first in a shady spot for a few hours, and then you just increase the time and increase the sun. And at 3 weeks, I pot them up, and at 6 weeks, they get planted out. Anything to add, Kathleen?
No, I think you got it.
Okay.
I actually buy most of mine.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, I have a really, really good nursery. There's actually 2 really good nurseries in Santa Cruz that have huge variety of tomatoes. And I have not gone there and found something that I'm looking for, and I can't find it.
Yeah. 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 So, and this year, for the first time, we, there's the lignin. We decided to try soil blocking as well. So we used the pit moss, the lignipede, and then 5-year-old really well composted horse manure. The soil blocking, I can't say I'm in love with it. I've been using these same 72 seed trays forever and ever. I've probably had them for 16 years and I'm still using them. They work great. I wash them out. They're fine. Anyway, I like them because I'm so used to them. I just put blue tape on the side and I mark what I've seeded. It's hard to see in the upper left, but that's on a heat mat. And I have a south facing window. So that's on a heat mat. And then you can kind of see on the upper left, that's the inside of a Cheerio box, that liner. And I just open it up and that's what I cover. And I save those. So I've been using those same covers forever and ever. I mean, you can buy fancy stuff and get little domes and, blah, blah, blah. But this is a really inexpensive way of doing it. And it works great. And then you can see the lower left, those are actually little broccoli seedlings. I planted them at the same time. And then I just put them outside and I tried it. The sun's the best. It's better than LEDs. It's better than fluorescent. The more sun they get, the sooner I feel like the healthier the plant is. So you can see in the lower right, I put them outdoors. I have brassicas in there, and then I also have some tomatoes and peppers. I cover them because birds love to eat those little brassica seedlings. So that's why they're covered up.
A lot of home gardeners probably save your 6-packs or even go to the nursery and they'll give you empty 6-packs. And that's probably enough.
Yeah.
If you want to start your own.
Yeah. And then you don't have to have more plastic created. And I will say, as far as hardening off, so I did put it under a cage. It's kind of a funky, I know that slide's a little funky, but then what I did when I knew it was going to be pretty cold at night, I would just go out and put, I just had a blanket is all it was, a picnic blanket. And I put it over. And, they can go down, even Soliancy, you don't, if it's going to be below freezing, if it's going to be below 32, you don't want them outside. But, they can go down to the high 30s. You get tired. I will say this, you get tired of bringing them in, taking them out, bringing them in. So I get really lazy. And I will say, I mean, this is a small smattering, but I run a farm with 10 other gardeners and, so we're planting hundreds and hundreds of seedlings. So it's a lot of work to bring them in, bring them out, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. Oh, there's me. So planting your seedlings. So those are some seedlings that we grew. You take off those bottom leaves and you just leave the top leaves. You just pinch them off. And then you can see in the second one there, the hole I dig is probably 18 inches. You want to bury that stem because those little nodes where you took off those leaves, it's going to root. And so you're going to get a really nice root system. So I dug a super, super deep hole and then I put my little tomato in. So the lower right is my tomato. We planted out April 24th this year. You can see all these grasses growing around and you're like, what the heck's going on there? And that's our cover crop. So Kathleen and I are really, really dedicated cover croppers. I love grass as a cover crop. if you want to know more about cover crop, you can go to the Lyngso website and you can watch. Kathleen gave a class on cover cropping. You can also see a broccoli leaf there in the lower right that the snails have gotten to. But I grew, I think a lot of publications are going to say don't grow broccoli with tomatoes because broccoli are antagonistic to mycorrhizal fungi and tomatoes need mycorrhizal fungi. But we'll get into why I did that a little bit later. Okay.
And I just leave the leaves on.
You leave the leaves on. Oh, you plant it with the leaves on. You don't pinch them off.
Yeah,
Oh, really? How come?
because I'm lazy. But those little leaves then turn into roots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't even, if you don't want to snap off those leaves, just leave them on.
Yeah, cool. Okay. This is how I've grown tomatoes for the last 16 years, or in these big cages. And this year I'm doing 4 different ways altogether. But right when I plant that tomato, I go ahead and however method I'm going to use for trellising it, I put it on there because tomatoes, well, this year we had a cold May and June, but usually those tomatoes just take right off, and trying to wrestle with them and get that cage on can be a real pain. So I go ahead and I put the cage on same day I plant them.
And their stems break really easily.
Yeah, so you have to be kind of careful with, and that's me with a sledgehammer. Oh, well, we'll get into caging in a minute.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we'll get into caging right now. So this is different ways to trellis your tomatoes. So we have a lower garden and an upper garden. This is our lower garden, and we're doing it 3 different ways here. One's a single stake. And so that's just right when we plant that tomato, or we put the stake in first, actually, then plant the tomato next to it. And that we'll get into pruning in a second, but you're going to use 1 liter. So every single sucker comes off. You're tying that tomato to that T-post, that T-stake, like pretty close. I mean, so you're just growing it vertical just with the liter that plant has, and every single sucker comes off. And we'll get into, like I said, get into pruning in a second. The benefit of this is you get really good air circulation. Since you're taking all the suckers off, you're not going to get as much fruit, but you can plant them more densely. So you could, every 2 feet, you could have a tomato. If you have a smaller space, but you want to really try 10 different tomatoes, this would be a way to go, I think, is just a single stake. But that being said, you have to keep on top of it. Like twice a week, you've got to be taking those suckers off. So that's one way of trellising. The other thing we're doing this year, for the first time, I've never done this before, is called the Florida weave or the Texas weave, or sometimes you hear it called a basket weave. And the T stakes are not at each tomato, they're at between each tomato. And you just go and you wrap twine around the T stakes, and then you go along the tomato, wrap the twine again, go along the tomato. So you're just tucking the tomato
like this. You're like doing an S.
Yeah. And you're tucking that tomato in. And actually how we're doing it, we're going down one side and then we're going down the other, and we're going around each post.
That's how a lot of growers do it.
Yeah, I will say this, it's super fast. And I mean, so far I like it. It's a good way to go. We planted our tomatoes 4 feet apart, but for this method, you could easily do 2 feet apart or 3 feet apart. This was taught by us by another master gardener who's been doing this for years. And I think she puts her tomatoes 2 feet apart, and then she has just like a wall of tomatoes. This we're going to 3 liters. So the original liter plus 2 suckers, and the suckers that start towards the bottom, like not a sucker that's high up. And then all other suckers are coming off because you're espaliating is what this is. You're growing a 2-dimensional tomato. Okay, Kathleen, anything to add to Florida weave?
No,
Okay.
I've
And
never
then,
done it.
yeah, I like it. I have to say, I mean, I like it. This is what I have been doing for years, and all these pictures were taken about a week ago. You can see the butt of the elephant. So on the left-hand side of the photo, my brother is an artist and he makes topiary, and he made a big elephant, and that's the butt. He's life-size elephant. Anyway, so you can use him like a quarter to see how big my tomato plants are. So these, we have our rebar in, they're all staked, and these are 3-dimensional, these you wouldn't really have to prune, but I still prune these to 3 liters, and I'm happy I did. You get better air circulation. These are 4 feet apart. And this, you're going to actually get probably a much higher yield, because at some point with cages, you give up and you stop taking your suckers off, and your suckers produce fruit. So it's not like suckers are bad. They produce fruit. It's just that the plant gets completely gigantic.
It's monstrous. I
Yeah.
will say to the cages,
Yeah.
make sure you secure them with rebar or something very sturdy. I had a client and her cages started tipping because I didn't know you needed to secure cages like that. And it was like dominoes. It just, all of her tomatoes tipped.
Oh, Kathleen, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was many years ago. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I learned, and I actually, then I used rebar and untipped, straightened them up and secured them. But it was a heck of a lot of work. And
Yeah.
it kind of takes something like that to get something into my brain. I had to have something really bad happen.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
remember. So
Yeah.
now cages, rebar are like chocolate and strawberries. They
Yeah.
just go together perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're on this slide, I want to mention a couple of things. You can see those little wooden stakes at the base of each tomato. That's just the little, we took the tags out of the tomatoes. These are Master Gardener tomatoes. But with my own tomatoes, I did the same thing. And we thumbnailed, or, you could use a little, whatever, thumbtack. But I put them on the path, not really next to the tomato. These tomatoes will get big and they'll just consume everything around them. And so when you put the tag like right by the base, well, you're going to have no idea what tomato that is. Now, this year we're keeping pretty good records. We're trying to keep pretty good records of, all our rows are numbered, and then we do okay from south to north. This is what we planted. And, but this is the belt and suspenders approach that, and I already know it's funny because the very first tomato you're looking at, it says sun gold, and it's not a sun gold. It's an heirloom tomato. So, somewhere something got messed up, and yeah, that's okay. That happens. But, anyway, that way you kind of know what you're growing. The other thing, 2 more things I want to say. We put mulch down. So that's just mulch actually that we grew ourselves. That's just, kind of like hay cuttings, but it's not nearly thick enough. That's maybe like 1 inch of mulch, and really we should have had 2 or 3 inches of mulch on there. So tomorrow we'll be putting more mulch on, and we're going to be putting a nice layer of mulch. You shouldn't see the ground like that. And then you'll see that there's wood chips in each of the paths. And I'm going to beg people, do not step on the soil. Step on your paths. There are a lot of people, if you're growing in raised beds, it's not an issue because you're not going to be stepping on your soil. Nothing likes compact soil, but tomatoes especially do not like compact soil. So when you step on that soil, instead of going around the path, going around, you're hurting that tomato. You're compacting its roots and compacting the soil. And that's And you're going to get, I mean, you're going to be more susceptible to disease if you compact your soil. So be really, really careful. A gardener did it the other day and I didn't say anything. It was really, really hard for me not to say something, but this gardener already thinks I'm a little picky. And so,
A little?
so I didn't want to like go, what the heck are you doing? Stuff in the soil?" But then I started reading about it and it's really, really bad. So just, I mean, this is not just tomatoes, but especially tomatoes, stay off your soil. So, okay, that's enough about that. All right. Oh, this is another one. This is not my garden. I wish it was. It's so beautiful. But this is a friend of mine's in France right now, and she sent a photo. This is another, there's millions of ways to trellis. So I just gave you 3 ways. This is another way. They're growing it on a single stake. You can see how they've tied it really closely to the stake. That means they're taking all their suckers off, and then it's going to grow up. I think it's probably going to be incredibly beautiful when it gets higher, but there's lots and lots of ways to trellis tomatoes. So you can Google it. We're doing the 3 different ways this year, but maybe I'll try this. It's just so pretty that, I mean, just for the beauty alone, I think it's nice to do.
I'm growing tomatoes along a like a cyclone fence.
Oh,
What do you call
okay.
those fences? So just it's almost like an espalier tomato,
Yeah.
and it's what was available on the property, and I wasn't gonna spend a bunch of money, doing something else. And I'm like, hey, this should work.
Yeah.
And so far so good.
Are you tying it to it or just
Yep.
poking it through? Okay.
No,
tying
I'm
it.
tying it to it. I just want it on one side. I don't want like a big mess
Yeah. Yeah.
through it. So I'm just tying it to it.
Cool.
And so far so good.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, and then Kathleen mentioned to me earlier, dry farm tomatoes, they don't trellis them at all. They just let them sprawl all over the ground, and they're keeping the ground, it's kind of acting like a living mulch. It's keeping the ground cool, especially when you're dry farming. You want to keep that ground really cool. You want to retain all moisture. And you could do that. I've never done that before, but maybe I'll try.
Yeah. And I also think, dry farming tomatoes, those farmers are not making much money.
Yeah.
I also think it's a labor cost issue as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Pruning. So we've been talking a lot about trellising, and let's talk for a minute about pruning. So a sucker, so you can see the graphic to the bottom left where it says sucker. So generally those little plants, right where the main stem is, and then you have a leaf, and then right in that axil, right in that junction is where you get a little sucker coming out. And you don't need pruners to take it off. You can just snap it right off. And here's the beauty is you can just put that in water, and within a week or 2, it'll root and you have a clone. And that's a true clone. This is not like an open pollinated or a hybrid, or you actually have a clone of that plant. The reason to do it, I really think, have some jars handy with some water in them when you're doing your pruning, and label them. So, sun gold is kind of expensive. The seed, to me, sun gold is expensive. But if you can do a clone of that sun gold, make a clone, which I did do. And it really, it works. It works beautifully. Do it early in the season, so you plant those out in, let's say, late April, early May, and they start suckering right away. So, by mid-May, you can have some already started in water, and you could go ahead and plant those out in late May. It's just nice to have backups. If something happens to your tomato plant, it's just nice to have a backup. So it's nice to go ahead and get some clones. You'll see where the fruit is nowhere near the leaf or the sucker. The fruit comes in between leaves on a stem that doesn't have foliage. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but in general, you're just going to get a branch off the main stem, and that's where your fruit is going to be.
Or
Now
the main branch.
yeah, well, here it's called the main stem, but
Okay.
yeah, but the suckers will fruit. You're going to get, if you let the suckers go, they're also going to develop
Yeah.
a branch off of that stem, and you're going to get more fruit. So the more suckers you leave, the more fruit you get, but it's also the plant gets really unruly. So it's a personal, it's a personal choice on that. The suckers usually at 45-degree angle. It kind of doesn't, I've seen a lot of my leaves are more at a 90-degree angle, and then the suckers at a 45-degree angle. And you get pretty good at recognizing suckers. I never prune the top. The reason why I don't do that is because more than once, I thought I was taking off a sucker and I was actually taking off the growing tip. And then I've just basically made that plant go kaput. So I leave like the top 6 inches. I don't do any pruning. And you'll do it soon enough as the plant grows. Anything, Kathleen, on pruning?
No, super easy. Just snap that sucker off. I don't clone them. I don't do anything. I just put them in the dirt. I just drop them.
Yeah, we're fine too. All right. And if you don't prune, this is my garden, but this is 2011. I found this picture, and this is an unpruned tomato. I didn't take any suckers off. There's a cage in there. There's like an 8-foot cage.
That, thank God, was rebarred into the ground.
And sometimes with cages, I not only rebar, I T-stake them.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of weight, on that cage. And, a tomato like that, that one's going to produce, I can't remember if I mentioned at the beginning, I think I've grown over, I did a quick calculation, I think I've grown over 11,000 pounds of tomatoes in my life. And you're going to get a lot of, pardon me,
On that plant.
on this single plant. So you're going to get, you're going to get a lot more tomatoes, but you're going to also have to crawl into that plant to get them. So I think some pruning makes sense, but to each his own.
There is a certain smell and crustiness your hands get when you start working with a tomato like that. And some people like it. Some people are like, it's stinky, but I mean, it's, you've been in tomatoes when you come out.
Yeah, that's true. When you emerge from that forest. Yeah. And it gets on your hand. I love it. I personally love it. I never wear gloves. So it's all over me. But one of my gardeners the other day, she was pruning tomatoes, and then she, kind of like wiped the sweat off her brow. And then she must have also wiped her face. I'm like, oh my God, does she have like sepsis or something? Her whole face was green by the end. I was like, oh, holy cow. But I didn't want to say anything till, maybe she was sick or something, but it really gets everywhere. I happen to love it. One thing I wanted to mention, and I'm going to try it this year, I haven't tried it before, is topping my tomato towards the end of the season. So what I learned last year, we kind of did it by proxy, but we all voted to keep the tomatoes in through November. And this year we're not doing that because we want to get our other crops in. We want to get all our brassicas in September, August, September, October. And then we couldn't, after you take those tomatoes off in November, there's nothing else you can plant. It's too late. So we're taking tomatoes out this coming year in October. So 4 weeks prior to that, September, we're going to top those tomatoes. We're going to top all of our tomatoes. That'll help the tomatoes that are on the vine ripen up. And last year we did the opposite. We took all the bottom branches off, so they all look like palm trees. And this year we're going to be doing the opposite. So we're going to be topping all those tomatoes, cutting all the growth tips off, and letting all that fruit ripen up and taking those tomatoes out. probably about October 15th, so we can still get some winter crops in. I was gonna say something. Oh, I just cut when I take them out, I cut them off at soil level and I put them in my compost pile. That's a lot of biomass right there. So it's a big addition to your compost pile. The exception to that is
If it's diseased.
if it's diseased. So
So
if you,
when you top, Lisa, are you gonna cut to a leaf? Or are you just literally topping?
it's probably going to depend if it's a single, like on my single poles
Yeah,
where I only have 1 liter, I'm just going to make one cut. Above fruit, a good point, Kathleen. You know, if there's some fruit set, I'm not going to cut right under it. I'm going to cut right above it.
Yeah.
So I'll probably cut to a leaf above that fruit so I don't get sun scald. Because in September it's still hot. And so for that, it's going to be easy. If we can, and I don't know if we can keep the others to 3 growing tips, we'll just tip each of those 3 things. Now, my guess is the one in cages, they're going to get away from us. And in an ideal world, what you would do is you would top every single sucker plus the
yeah.
main.
Just use your hedge trimmer.
Yeah, maybe that. Those are in cages. That'll be a little trickier.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah. And then what we were saying, as far as taking them out at the end of the season, leave those roots in there. They're just going to decompose and add organic matter to that soil. Put everything in your compost pile, unless it's diseased. If you have verticillium, we'll go into this in a minute, but if you have any soil-borne disease, you're going to actually take all those roots out and do not put it in your compost pile. Put it in the garbage, unfortunately, sorry to say. All right. Talk about diseases. Here we are.
Holy smokes.
Holy smoking Joe. So tomatoes can get a lot of diseases. The first couple of rows are invertebrates. Those are insects that they can get. And then it goes into diseases, like mostly caused by fungi. Some of are viruses. Some are bacteria. So those are diseases. And then there are environmental disorders like sun scald. Almost every year I have some tomatoes with sun scald. Blossom end rot is because you are not watering your tomato consistently. Fruit crack, fruit just crack, on a sun scald, it's going to crack.
Yeah.
Tomato leaf roll is an environmental, usually it's a little too cold. Then you've got vertebrates, gophers and rats and squirrels and all sorts of stuff. And then weed management. So that's everything that a tomato can get, but what we get in the Mid-Peninsula, as far as insects, I think we get about 4. Sometimes there's aphids. I haven't had a huge problem with aphids.
Me neither.
This is interesting, this photo. So these photos aren't from my plants. This is just off the web, but when I have gotten aphids, they've been green. They have not been that color. So, and I get them at the end of the season when that plant knows it's lived its happy life. And then sometimes I get aphids coming in, but, so anyway, that now I have gotten a couple of hornworms. And I think they're so cute.
They are cute.
They're super cute and they're super squishy.
And what do you think is their head is actually their butt?
Where the horn is that their
Yeah.
butt?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see their little chewing mouth parts on the left of that photo, but
And their funny little legs.
yeah. When you see them for the first time, so we have one gardener she's taller than the rest of us, and she's always the one who finds the hornworms. They're big. I mean, they're like
Yeah.
an 1.5 inches. And when you see them for the first time, you're like, I don't want to scream, but you go, I mean, they're kind of scary looking, but then they're just so cute that you get over it pretty quickly. Tomato russet mite. So Kathleen and I, for the first time last year, Kathleen, or the year before last?
I think it was the year before last.
Yeah. For the first time in the Bay Area, or where we garden, Central Peninsula, we had tomato russet mites at one of our clients, at like two of our clients' gardens.
Yeah.
And you'll see this really silvery metallic, and it's a mite. We took off the leaves. What else did we do, Kathleen?
That's all we did. We took off the leaves that were infected, and then we went up one more level and took off those leaves, and that seemed to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't spray anything. We didn't, the plant lost a bunch of leaves, but it almost looked like they had thrips, that kind of silvery color that leaves get. And
Yeah.
They probably weren't photosynthesizing much anyway. So we took them off, and then we went up another level. And I think I read in the UCIPM to do that. I mean, they always give you a couple choices.
Right.
And I'm going to take the choice that doesn't put chemicals in the soil.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then whitefly, for the first time, I've never had whitefly before. For the first time I do, we had an irrigation issue with the lower garden, where those photos were taken from. Unfortunately, with whitefly, it's probably because you're overwatering, and we did overwater, like kind of grossly overwatered. It was
And not mulching well.
and not mulching well. So it was a little bit of a snafu. Unfortunately, you have to spray them off, which is adding more water, which is not what you want to be doing with whitefly. But we sprayed them off. What's today? I think we sprayed them off Monday. We went and looked at them yesterday, Kathleen, and
Yeah.
they looked fine.
Yeah, there were a few, but nothing I would worry about.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to put a bunch of mulch and correct your water issue.
Yeah. The
And-
water issue has now been corrected.
Yeah, and same with the aphids. I mean, they get on the ground and they can't get back up on your plant.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just don't have the physical ability. So you spray them off and that's it. They're gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hornworms you just hand pick. So
Yeah.
all these things we don't use. So on my little farm, we have never used herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, or fertilizer. We've never fertilized in 15, 16 years. But we'll get into that.
Did your chickens eat hornworms?
We didn't have the chickens we got about 3 months ago or so. So we didn't have them, but this year I'm going to give them the hornworms. As far as disease, so that was insects. Diseases, again, from that long list, I think there's only really 2 that we get in this area. And one of them's,
Unless you smoke.
pardon me,
Unless you smoke.
unless you smoke, and then you might get the tomato, tomato mosaic virus.
Yeah.
Fusarium and verticillium. So Fusarium, and we saw, so Kathleen and I helped consult at Portola Valley Ranch last summer. Fusarium favors warm soil. And unfortunately, I think it was almost all their beds, Kathleen,
Yeah.
got Fusarium. Kathleen did quite a bit of research into it and what you can cover crop. Once you get either one of these, Fusarium or verticillium, it's in your soil indefinitely. It's in your soil forever. And so what you need to do is plant resistant varieties, which are just resistant. They're not proof, or stay away from any crop that that's a host for either of these, which is hard to do. So these are tough. There's no doubt about it. These are tough diseases to get, and you cry a sea of a million tears if you get them. And we need to circle back and see how PV Ranch is doing.
Yeah.
We cover cropped with oats, Kathleen?
Rice.
Okay. Cover cropped with rice. That should bring the Fusarium load down. And we'll get into verticillium in a minute of some ways to help control the load in your soil. And here it is, speaking of the devil. And we'll also have a poll coming up. So can get the poll ready in just a minute. So this is some research done. This was found out by accident in the late, like 1999, late 90s, early 2000s. And it was kind of discovered by cauliflower farmer
Yeah.
that they grew 2 crops of broccoli back to back before they grew a crop of cauliflower. And they noticed they didn't get any verticillium wilt in their cauliflower. So since then, in the last 20 years, they've been looking at this, and this is UC Davis has done the research on this. And it looks like if you grow a fall broccoli, let's say an August planted broccoli, and then you plant broccoli out again in February, which are good times to be planting broccoli. And then you put your tomatoes in April, May, that's your back-to-back crop of broccoli. You have brought down the verticillium load in your soil. All soil has verticillium, all soil has fusarium, but you bring down the load, and then you can go ahead and plant tomatoes in there. We have kept our broccoli this year, so now we're harvesting broccoli in between our tomatoes. That's not recommended. I don't see any adverse effects of that so far, because the verticillium load goes down as that broccoli plant gets older. So if you want to control verticillium, I think this is the way to go.
And specifically broccoli, nothing else.
Yeah, it's just broccoli. It's weird, but all the other brassicas, not all of them, but almost all the other brassicas get verticillium. So along with a whole bunch of other stuff. So now we have a poll. So everybody wake up if you've been sleeping. If you guys can, we'll put up a poll. This is some pictures taken 2 days ago in my garden, in the lower garden. One caged and one it's also in the Texas weave row. So what do you think this is? If you had just everything we just went over on diseases, what do you think this is? And there's the poll, so you guys can go ahead and vote. And you have, I don't know, 10 seconds or something to vote. Oh wow, this is cool.
Yeah, it's cool, huh?
You guys are so smart. Jesus.
Oh,
You guys should be teaching this class. Can you share the results? Okay. I would say, I think the winner is verticillium.
yeah.
Which that's what Kathleen and I also think it is. Fusarium's a close second. And then we have nutrient deficiency, early blight. So just to kind of go over these answers a little bit. So fusarium likes warm soil. And I didn't mention this, so probably people voting already knew this. Verticillium prefers cool soil. It loves cool soil. And we've had a very cold May, very cold June, wet May, very unusual. And then I mentioned we had a watering snafu. So we overwatered. And I think with all those circumstances made verticillium. Oh, and we have 3 ash trees. Ash is a host for verticillium. We have 3 ash trees, which I didn't mention, about 100 feet away from our tomato patch. So we're hoping it's not verticillium, but it might be. Early blight, we don't get in this area. I mean, you do, but it's rare. Nutrient deficiency is Kathleen and our second guess. Could be a nutrient deficiency, but why
It wasn't my guess.
Okay, it was my guess. But do you see the triangles on those leaves? And they're not going past that margin, that triangle. That's a telltale sign of verticillium.
And unfortunately, the only way I cut a leaf off to see if the stem was clean.
Yeah.
And it was. And unfortunately, the only way to tell if this really is verticillium is to cut the plant off its soil level and look at the stem and the pattern of brown within the stem will tell you what it is. Or what Lisa's going to do
is, I'll go to the next slide. This is me crying my I swear to God, I'm not kidding here. I haven't slept in 2 nights. I guess we can, my results are still up. Maybe they aren't for you guys, but, yeah, I cried a million tears when I thought I had verticillium because it's really, really limiting. I can't grow anything in the cucurbit family there. I can't grow anything in the Solanaceae family there. That's why I showed you that first slide at the beginning of the show. There's only 4 things you can grow in summer. So the only things I can grow now here are corn and beans. And for summer stuff, I can grow broccoli, but tons of brassicas get verticillium. So I can't grow cauliflower. I can't grow cabbage. I can't grow Brussels sprouts. I can grow, oddly enough, the whole Amaranthaceae. So beets, spinach, I can grow that for my winter crops there, but I'll be growing a lot of broccoli there. But that's me crying a million tears and my worst fears. But what I decided to do, I think it's on the next slide, is I'm having my soil tested. I was going to do that anyway. So I'm going to have my soil tested. And I talked to Waypoint, which is where I'm sending my stuff there in Anaheim. I talked to them yesterday, and I'm going to send also, they have a plant pathologist on staff. So I'm going to send some of the plant material, the affected material. And everybody in this audience, all 92 of you, cross your fingers. That is nutrient deficiency. And the reason why I think it might be, but I'm not that hopeful, it was really, really overwatered. It was kind of like a break basically in the watering thing, and it got super, super overwatered for like 2 weeks. When you overwater like that, all your nitrogen is just leaching out of your soil. So all my nitrogen went away with all that overwatering. And so there's a chance that it could be a nutrient deficiency.
Fingers
and then-
crossed, but not, it looks more like nitrogen burn than nitrogen deficiency.
We're trying to be hopeful so Lisa can get a little sleep that night. And there's a list of everything I can no longer grow. So yay me. And it's really bad on I've had to take out maples. It's really, so there's trees that get it. There's herbaceous plants that get it. There's a lot of vegetables that get it. There's a lot of flowers that get it. So if you want, this isn't a complete list of everything that's a host, but if you want a complete list, just go to UCANR. And I put everything, by the way, you'll get this presentation. I'll send it to you. And everything's in the resources. So you can just click on that. So that'll be easy for you guys. So I've also used A&L labs, and I know we're supposed to mention 3 different places to get your soil tested if you feel like you want to. I've been happy and used A&L, but I'm using Waypoint, and actually because that's who Lyngso uses, and I trust Lyngso a lot. All right, so let's get back to best practices. So you don't run into this. Rotate your crops. The main thing you can do is rotate those crops. So we have always said 3 years, don't put Solanaceae back into the same soil. Give your soil a 3-year break. UCANR, so the UC Agricultural and Natural Resources, say 5 years. Now I haven't done that. I've done it 3 years. I'll take Solanaceae out. By the way, that includes if you've got nightshade, the weed called American nightshade, take it out. I do not weed. I cut all weeds off at soil level. I leave those roots in unless it's American nightshade, and I take that out because I do not want my load going up of pathogens. Water evenly, we've talked about that. Mulch, and I need to have more mulch, and I know that, and we're going to be putting more mulch on. Full sun, grow 2 seasons back to back of broccoli, which we were just talking about. And then you don't have control over this, but if it's over 90 or under 55, you're going to have a hard time with fruit set on that.
And can I say one thing about mulching?
Please.
I used to mulch all my tomatoes with alfalfa because Cynthia down at Love Apple Farm, I went to one of her classes and she said tomatoes love alfalfa. Well, since then, there's a disease that alfalfa can transmit to tomatoes So I no longer mulch with alfalfa. And besides all that, alfalfa is GMO'd.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's been.
So are
sprayed
you
with
just
Roundup.
doing
I just use straw.
straw? Yeah, we're going to be putting straw down
Yeah,
tomorrow.
or
so.
or with my lawnmower, like one of my clients, I just cut her grass with my lawnmower.
Yeah.
And I use that grass.
Yeah, as long as they're not dumping a bunch of
Yeah.
pesticides or
And they're not.
yeah. So then that's fine. All right. Dry farming. Kathleen, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I did a class on dry farming, I don't know, maybe last year. And since then, Lisa and I went to a dry farming conference at UC Santa Cruz, which was fairly interesting and confusing all at the same time. But dry farming really comes down to the choice of tomato you use. And they use any of the girls, early girl, there's
Dirty
another
girl,
and
dirty girl, new girl.
Yeah, new girl. And dry farming is you have to have a pretty wet winter to have enough moisture in the ground. You can water when you plant your tomato, and that's it. They don't trellis, they just let the plants grow along the ground. They get a premium price for their tomatoes because the flavor is so much more intense because there's no water or very little water in the tomato. But it's just, we're in a drought, which is why I gave the class a year ago before we had such a wet winter. And it's just another way to grow tomatoes.
Yeah. And I might try. I haven't tried it. Well, actually, I did try it up. I live in Portola Valley, even though I garden in Woodside. And I did try it here. They didn't make it, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty hot here. And I'm south.
And this is, I should also say, this is along the coast, up by
Davenport. Yeah.
So it doesn't get super hot. It doesn't get super cold. It's pretty temperate. And that's where they dry farm.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And we're going to finish up here pretty quick and take your questions. Just record keeping. This is my record keeping this year of what plants I started, how many I started, the date I seeded, date germinated, how many germinated. I had some old seeds. Those aren't great germination rates, but my newer seed, I get much better germination rates. But I mean, I used to be really meticulous and really, really good at record keeping. I've gotten a little lazy lately, but
and I never have.
Yeah. So, and I do it all on Google Sheets, and it's nice. I just have a spreadsheet and I have different years down at the bottom. And it's nice information to have. I also do it because, well, we've got 37 rows altogether, 37 rows that are about 25 feet long. And I want to make sure I don't put my tomatoes, eggplant, peppers back into the same rows again. And so, anyway, record keeping's anyway, it's important, but whatever. A few words about the soil food web, and then we're going to get to your questions. Kathleen, you want to talk?
Yeah, soil food web is about 20 years ago. Elaine Ingham discovered that there's actually life in the soil, and we know about 10% of the life in the soil, and actually most life on planet Earth, on the Earth part, lives in the soil. And these microbes feed our plants, and our plant feed them. The sun feeds the plant, which is the miracle of life on planet Earth. And the plant will give 30 to 50% of its energy, carbohydrates, into the soil to feed the microbes in the soil. And through chemical signals and hormones, it will tell the microbes in the soil what it needs that day. And because it's feeding those microbes, the microbes will then go out, find what nutrients that plant needs that day, and bring them back.
Cool. Yay. It's really important. Why feed the web? Maybe just a few words, Kathleen. I have never fertilized. I don't know. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just never have. But maybe you could go over just organic fertilizer versus synthetic fertilizer. And that being said, what I just said, I do put compost on 3 times a year. I put compost on. So
Yeah,
some people call
and
compost.
mulch heavily, which the microbes also love mulch.
Yeah, but the
syn-
microbes. Yeah, go ahead.
Synthetic fertilizers are actually a high energy salt-based chemical that feeds your plant, supposedly, but it's a whole spectrum of nutrients in there, the biggest one being nitrogen. And your plant might not need nitrogen that day, but because of the high salt content, it kills all the microbes. So then your plant becomes dependent on a synthetic fertilizer. And when you water, any nitrogen that your plant didn't use goes down into either our water table, which is now polluted in almost all of California, or out into the ocean, and it makes algae blooms, which are now killing dolphins and sea otters in Santa Barbara. So if you are going to fertilize, use an organic fertilizer. For the first time, I used fish emulsion, and I used a very low concentration just to see if I could give some plants a little kickstart because it's been so cool. And to tell you the truth, I've seen no difference in how well those plants are doing. And organic fertilizers feed the microbes, which then feed the plant. But I need to do more research to know if you're feeding the microbes, is the plant still going to feed the microbes as well? So I don't know the answer to that yet, but I will get back to you.
Yeah, the jury's still out on that. And either one, certainly with the synthetic fertilizer, yeah, that's just leaching, especially if you're overwatering and putting synthetic fertilizer. That's just leaching right out of your soil, as you said, and going into the Gulf of Mexico. And now Florida is having a huge problem right now with algae blooms because it's sucking all the oxygen out of water.
And Santa Barbara, I mean, literally,
And that's so sad.
sea otters and dolphins
Yeah.
swim through the algae bloom and it kills them.
Yeah. So I don't know. We can't, everybody's going to do what they're going to do. But if you love dolphins, if you ever watch Flipper growing up, don't use synthetic fertilizers. And if you're going to use an organic fertilizer, really dilute the heck out of it. You just don't, the microbes are feeding that plant. You don't need to feed the microbes. They can take care of themselves like they have been doing for millions of years. So, okay.
Okay.
Next. Oh, feed the soil. I think we've beat this horse enough.
Yeah.
I did add one super important with tomatoes. Do not compact your soil, but I already talked about that.
And Lyngso's Veggie Blend is an amazing product.
Yeah, it's really good. Don't till. We're no-till cover cropping people. And some of our faves. For cherries, I like Sun Gold, Super Sweet 100s, and Chocolate Cherry. And I grow a lot of San Marzanos for my paste. And I like Paul Robeson. I like pineapple. I like Genuine's a hybrid. It's a seed that I think you can only get from Territorial, but I like it. It's a nice tomato, and I like Brandywine. Kathleen, you?
I like Paul Robeson a lot.
Yeah.
Paul Robeson on the coast is a little iffy. I'm trying to think some of the stuff I have on the coast. I just planted Dirty Girl.
Yeah.
And I'll see what she does. I plant Sun Gold only because my spouse loves Sun Gold. I hate harvesting cherry tomatoes.
Yeah.
It just takes so damn much time.
Yeah.
But Love Apple Farm has a really nice list of tomatoes of what's coastal and what's not. Yeah. And I go on her list and I see what's coastal, and then I go to a different nursery and I buy the coastal recommendations.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on where you live. You know, if you have coastal conditions, you can't get, you know, super big fat
Yeah.
tomatoes because it's not going to get hot enough.
Yeah, and where I'm at, I can do a beef steak and I can, before we go, and I just want to note the sun scald, you see, if you look at those tomatoes, like in the lower right,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you see this big white spot. So that sun scald, that just means there wasn't like a leaf in front of that tomato and the sun hit it. That's just abiotic. Is that what, you know,
Yeah.
there's nothing to be, well, you can do stuff about it and keep some leaf cover on your tomatoes because that's what's photosynthesizing and feeding those tomatoes. But without leaf cover, you're gonna get sun scald, especially in hotter areas. Okay, wrapping up. Cherry tomatoes take a long time to harvest. On the lower left, you see all those cherry tomatoes. The nice thing, like a beefsteak, well, here, you know, in mid-peninsula where it gets hot, you know, you can get a tomato and it's going to weigh a pound or two, and that takes a second or something. You know, there's Mr. Stripey in there. That took me a second to harvest. And all those tomatoes on the left-hand side. Yeah, that's just a lot of work. So they're delicious, but I now limit, not so, yeah, even at the garden farm. I usually limit myself to 2 cherry tomatoes, usually a sun gold and a sweet 100. I do love chocolate cherry a lot. So if I allow myself a 3rd cherry, it'll be a chocolate cherry. But it's just so much time with harvesting those little guys. Since the class was called Seed to Salsa, I thought I should throw in some recipes. So these are things that I have made, although Jen Upson a friend of mine did the lower left because she's so artistic. She's so good. And then my daughter did the falafels with the little tomatoes. And then it's a really nice cucumber salad with cucumber, avocado, tomatoes, feta, and then just a little lemon juice and olive oil. And I grow so many San Marzanos. I like to roast them, and I make a delicious soup, which the recipe's next. And then the hominy, it's that squeaky cheese that squeaks. That's New York Times. That'll be the next recipe too. And then that's another artistic, that's my platter and my tomatoes, but somebody else did it because it looks so pretty. I know when it's not me. I love this recipe. It's roasted tomato soup with basil from Barefoot Contessa. It's delicious. You'll get this, so you don't need to copy it down. And then this is just New York Times, Melissa Clark. This is so delicious. I made it. It's just so good. So I'm anxious for my cherry tomatoes because this is such a nice recipe. And there's all our references. You'll get all of those. And Craig LaHooler, I don't know if you guys know him. He's kind of the tomato guru of the entire country. And I also listen to Joe Lampel a lot, his podcast and Growing a Greener World. That's just great resources. And almost everything else is from UC Davis, UC A&R, and UC IPM. And Pam Pierce's book, I reread that for tomatoes. And so, I mean, there's so much stuff out there. And there's really good information out there. I try to keep it kind of local, but North Carolina State University has done a lot of research into verticillium. And we want to thank Lyngso's very much for allowing us to talk. And I think we're ready for questions. Sorry, we went a little bit over what I wanted to. But I think I'm going to stop sharing. And maybe you can give us the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go ahead and do this. Perfect. Okay. Trimming. So pruning tomatoes, can you trim off the bottom leaves as they turn yellow?
Yes.
Yeah, I do that. And even before they turn yellow, I take off those bottom leaves just because you don't want like fungal spores splashing up on them. So
And can you just mulch with that leaf right there, or do you want to compost it or take it away?
I just leave it on the ground.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
All right.
Diseased, and then it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about root rot and see if it's common in tomatoes?
Is that Phytophthora, Kathleen?
I don't know.
I haven't seen it in tomatoes. That doesn't mean, have you seen it ever, Kathleen?
No, I haven't. But I mean, my gut instinct tells me if you have root rot, it's overwatered or you don't have drainage.
Yeah.
That would be the only reason to have root rot. So, but I don't know specifically.
I would say the same thing. It's a watering issue. We have clay soil here. Well, there's a garden where Kathleen is gardening that doesn't have clay soil, but so you do want to amend your soil with compost to get a higher organic matter so you get better drainage. And I only have the same comment you have, Kathleen, is that somehow those roots are just sitting in water. Maybe it's in a pot and maybe you're overwatering the pot. That could be a possibility too.
Yeah, or you put pebbles at the bottom of your pot and you don't have a soil interface or you don't have drainage.
Yeah.
I will say, everybody with clay soil, thank your lucky stars. Because sandy soil, you have to water way more, you have to amend way more. It just doesn't hold anything. It's sandy soil. So I hear people complain about their clay soil all the time, and I'm like, oh, I need some clay soil.
If only.
Okay, so the next question is there ever a reason to pluck the first flowers that form on a new tomato plant? Example, the plant is too young or too small to start producing fruit.
No,
No, but I've heard that before from other people. And I've heard other people say, well, then your tomatoes will size up better. You'll get better size on them. And we do that with fruit trees. We thin the fruit on fruit trees. I've never done it on a tomato. Guess I could try.
I've never done it on a tomato either. And I trust the tomato plant more than myself as to when it should start flowering and setting fruit.
Yeah.
So if my tomato is flowering and setting fruit, I'm believing the plant.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Is there a living mulch like Dutch white clover that you can recommend for tomatoes?
That's a great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah. And maybe Dutch white clover is the answer to the question. There's a gardener on the East Coast in the Hudson Valley, and he's a big cover cropper, and he uses white Dutch clover in his paths. I always put wood chips, but he puts it in his paths and just walks on it, like a lawn. And I don't know how old this person is. If you're young enough, try it for a year or two, and then try not doing it for a year or two and mulch with straws and see what you see with your difference. But you think too much nitrogen, Kathleen, with a clover?
I do.
Okay.
I think you're getting too many of the bacterium that fix the nitrogen that eat all your carbon. I would put like lobelia. I would put something flowering that grows low, but I wouldn't put a legume.
Okay. And I would probably, to counteract that, I wouldn't mind having some legume, maybe you would also put some alyssum or some lobelia. But I would think some clover would be okay. Well, that's what I would do. However, we're super, we had so many poppy. We're super into California natives for our cover cropping. So I actually am not using alyssum or lobelia, but we're using.
Yeah, I got this little blue flower.
Oh,
no, it's short.
Yeah.
It's a short little blue flower.
Uh-huh.
I threw out, wildflower seeds.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely.
Huh.
And it doesn't get that big. I don't know what it is because I'm not a native plant expert.
Yeah.
But I would certainly cover crop with that.
Yeah, maybe take a photo. Because
Yeah, I actually don't think tomatoes need as much nitrogen as we give them.
yeah, I mean, everybody
That's-
says nitrogen, but yeah.
That's a perfect segue to the next question is, what's wrong with using too much nitrogen for tomatoes?
Oh, well, I can remember Lisa and I went to a Master Gardener soils class, and the instructor was from Sacramento, and he poured the nitrogen on his tomato and couldn't understand why he never got any fruit. And this was a UC professor,
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
So too much nitrogen, your plant's going to grow. It's not going to set fruit.
Yeah.
That's what
So,
I can remember when I worked at Orchard Supply Hardware. We learned the 3 numbers, which are nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate. Is that right?
phosphorus. Yeah.
I always get the last 2 mixed, but it was up, down, all around. So you
Yeah.
don't want your plant to get huge and not have fruit.
Yeah.
And that's what nitrogen will do.
Yeah. Lots and lots of green growth.
Yeah. And no fruit.
Okay, thank you. Please comment on use of soil solarization to mitigate verticillium.
Yeah.
UC recommends it. Soil solarization kills everything in your soil, all your microbes. They can't take the heat.
Yeah.
So you're trying to kill one thing. It's kind of like Roundup. You're trying to kill one thing and you're killing everything.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend it, but
Yeah.
it is a UC practice.
Yeah. I mean, I will add to that. If you have your backyard is however many square feet and you have verticillium and that's the only place you can grow. I certainly don't like solarization for that very reason. It's going to kill everything in your soil. But if you have verticillium, I might try it. I mean, you'd have to bring the life back into that soil. And you'd have to look how the UC recommends to do it. But yeah, you're going to kill, especially if it's hot out and you're using black plastic. I mean, you're going to kill at least the top 2 inches of every creature, every single bacterium, fungi, insect, earthworm. You're killing you're killing 98% good things to get the 2% bad. But that being said, that might be what you have to do. So I'm going to never say never, but it would be a last resort for me.
Yeah, I would just follow up is soil solarization better than excavating soil and tossing it?
I think unfortunately, if you have verticillium, you can't excavate it and toss it because the verticillium, well, how like an ash tree, Kathleen. I mean, it's going to be down pretty deep in your soil. I mean,
well, let's just tomatoes. I mean, tomato roots go down 8 feet.
yeah.
So you're going to have to rent a backhoe and dig down 8 feet. And you're probably not going to get every little spore of verticillium. Personally, I would plant broccoli back to back.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I think your better bet is go with host crops that don't have that verticillium is not a host for, and do that for a year or 2. I mean, you can have a lot of corn and beans in the summer and a lot of broccoli in the winter and beets and spinach and chard. But I would do that and see if you can bring that load down. Do a fall and a spring, maybe starting this August, do a fall and a spring of broccoli and maybe grow some beans in the summer and then do that again. And then plant resistant varieties. If you love tomatoes, then I'd go ahead and plant a VN. I think it was Sungold, right? That's or FV, it's Fusarium and verticillium
resistant. It's on a little tag at the nursery. It gives the name of the plant and then it gives the letters.
Yeah. But I think that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Okay. So this question is regarding blossom end rot. This person lives in Mountain View and they're starting to see the problem. Should the frequency and duration of watering the tomatoes be adjusted, and how do they keep the water consistent?
Well, I have an irrigation timer, so I keep my water consistent. But if you don't water the same days of the week, probably 2 days a week, but the same days of the week, until the water goes down, say 3 inches. Yeah, that's all I know.
Yeah, I think that's good. What you don't want, everybody will say, oh, it's a calcium deficiency, but it's just that the calcium is plenty of calcium in the soil. It's just not getting to the plant. And that's because there's it's too dry for too long and then too wet for too long. So
It's not that it's not getting to the plant, it's not conducting through the plant to the tomatoes.
better, thanks.
And it's also a salt issue in your soil. So that generally is either synthetic fertilizers or not enough water, that you have salt buildup and you need to leach it out.
So don't use synthetic fertilizers once again, because all they are is salt. That's what they are.
Exactly.
Okay, so this person planted 1 gallon well-established stupus in Lower Haight Street backyard a week ago in San Francisco.
Mhm.
It gets 10 hours sun on good days, but has foggy, but it has been foggy, which is why they waited. And they're hoping for an October crop. Do you think it could happen?
Are you a religious person?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think so. In October, they don't have high expectations. I mean, I think,
Fog is not the same as shade.
yeah,
Gee, some of the sun's energy still comes through to your plants in fog.
yeah.
I had a Meyer lemon in the sunset and it got plenty of sunlight. And
Yeah,
I
and-
was fogged in half the year.
Yeah, and Lower Haight, right? They get a little bit more sun,
Yeah,
don't
they
they?
get more sun. They're on the other side of Parnassus.
Yeah.
So,
And I just read this person, I would probably pick up a copy of Pam Pierce's book,
Yeah.
Golden Gate Gardening. I just read last night when I couldn't sleep because I was worried about verticillium. That Pam was saying in some of the gardens that, and she's a fantastic, by the way, she's really she's a fantastic gardener and teacher. And but she was saying that she had gardens that she knew of that were quite close to the ocean, and they had better luck with some tomatoes than people who were 3 miles, like inland valleys. And so it's a good book to read if you're trying to grow tomatoes, because she's pretty good, and she recommends her book was published, Kathleen. Oh, it's probably been a long time now because we were taking
Yeah.
her class. Her
it
book
doesn't
might be
have all the newest tomatoes in it, but
right, but look for the city fogger, and stupus isn't a huge tomato, right? That's like a medium-sized tomato.
yeah,
So
I've grown stupus.
I think, but maybe next year try one of the girls, try early girl or new girl or dirty girl. And certainly a cherry tomato, you can grow a cherry tomato in the city.
Yeah, but stupus should do fine.
Yeah.
And you're getting a lot of sunlight when the sun is shining, and the sun's energy is still coming through fog. It might not be warm enough, but you're still getting some energy.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, is all yellowing of leaves cause for concern?
No,
I think that's a great question. I will say this, it's cause for investigation. It's cause for curiousness, and it's cause to really look at that leaf and look at the pattern and do some research. But it could, my second guess was nutrient deficiency on my plants. And the reason I thought that is a lot of times the plant will steal the nitrogen from the lower leaf if it's trying to grow and it's not optimal and it is getting a little low on nitrogen, it'll steal it from the lower plants, the lower leaves to feed the growth. And so it could just be something simple like that. And then maybe you would cover crop, or maybe you would add a little bit of organic fertilizer. Kathleen?
it could just be an older leaf towards the bottom of your plant that's getting shaded out. I mean, plants are really smart. If a leaf starts to get shaded out, it stops photosynthesizing because it can't, and it gives its energy to the plant. And like those are the leaves we were saying, we take off the leaves on the bottom and we just drop on the ground.
Yeah.
If you have a yellow leaf up on the top of your plant, then I would do some investigation.
That being said, if it's disease, it almost always starts on the lower leaves.
Yeah. But just yellow isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's cause for investigation.
Yeah. Okay. Investigate.
Oh, I don't know if I mentioned with my leaves. So I sent it to 10 master gardeners and I got 10 different answers. And the reason I want to say, and I think this crowd might be a little better than some, you guys answered that pretty well, I thought, when we can't put up the poll. But the point is, I mean, Kathleen and I have been growing tomatoes for a long, long time. We don't know, we have a yellow leaf and we're like, I don't know, let's look it up. And getting 10 different answers from 10 different master gardeners kind of proves that, this is just, we're all in it together. We're all just learning together. And sure, there's some people that might have been doing it longer and are more observant and more curious. But if you ask that to 10 master gardeners, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Alrighty. What to do for moldy leaves or dark spots on stems?
That sounds like bacteria. Oh, it could be fungal. There is a disease where you get dark spots on the stems, and I think it is a fungal disease, and I can't think of what it is. Maybe it's even just called black spot. Shoot, I don't have that at my fingertips. But on the last slide, you can call into the helpline and they have to, by law, research it for you.
Or you could take a really good photo of it or several photos of it.
Yeah.
And go to Sloat Gardens and talk to one of the people there who knows what they're talking about and see if they have any ideas, because they have dealt with, well, I guess this might not be San Francisco.
Yeah.
If you are San Francisco, go to Sloat. If not, yeah, call the master gardeners.
I'd call the master gardeners, but the same thing, I'd write an email, I'd take as many photos as you can, and then I'd go through the conditions. I'd go, oh, it's planted right next to petunias. Well, petunias are in the Solanaceae family. They're a carrier for verticillium. Anyway, I would just give them as much cultural information, how often you're watering it, what kind of soil you have. And they can research it, and they're not going to be definitive, or they shouldn't be definitive in their answer, but they can get back to you and they can say, gee, with black spot, we either think it's this or this. And then they might ask a few more questions, and they're really good. I'm not trying to disc the master gardeners at all. My point with, you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. And that's the way it should be. That's appropriate, because unless they're there growing that plant, seeing the conditions, they just aren't going to know.
So we do have quite a lot of folks from San Francisco attending today. So I'm going to summarize all those questions. It's pretty much, how do you grow tomatoes in a fog city? And there's a lot of concerns there, and, curiosity as to what to grow and what varieties does best. And I know you recommended Pam Pierce's Golden Gate Gardening book. Are there other resources that they can use to learn more about growing in the city in a fog belt, essentially?
I'll just do short, Kathleen, and then this is a much better question for you, because Kathleen lived in the city for like 30 or 40 years. But yeah, I mean, at the our master gardeners are San Mateo and San Francisco County. And so we have plenty of master gardeners who live in San Francisco County. And there's some fantastic gardeners up there. And at our plant sale each year, we grow specifically for the city. I think we grow city fogger. I think one of our master gardeners have even hybridized a San Francisco tomato that does really well. So I think Pam Pierce is a good resource, but I think the master gardeners of San Francisco County, which are combined with us, the San Mateo County, is a really good resource as well. Kathleen, do you want to share your experience of being in the city?
Yeah, when I first moved into my house, I didn't have full sun, and then my neighbors cut down their tree and I had full sun. So I was then able to grow tomatoes, and I think that's key right there, is you need full sun. Not just San Francisco, but anywhere, you need full sun to grow tomatoes well. I grew cherry tomatoes and I grew small tomatoes because you don't get the heat. I put mine in the ground because I think the ground has more I just trust the ground, actually. But if you're gonna grow them in containers, trek down to Lyngso's and get some really good soil for your plants and water them consistently. It's kind of the same thing. It's just you need full sun and you need to grow a variety that will do well in San Francisco. I will say the San Francisco fogger, I never thought was worth it. It doesn't have great flavor. I would much prefer Sun Gold, which is smaller, but tastes much better.
Okay, alrighty. We've got time for one last question here. How to handle root knot nematodes? Root
Oh.
knot nematodes.
Yeah. My neighbor across the street, who's in a raised bed, has root knot nematodes. I'm not sure how he got them, but he goes online and you can buy nematodes that eat the bad nematodes.
Mm.
You can also plant mustard twice during the growing season. Mustard kills maybe it doesn't kill nematodes, but it makes them leave. And there's specifically, look up nematode mustard and you'll get the plant. I think it's, where do I get all my plants from, Lisa? Nature's something.
Nature Seed.
Yeah, Nature Seed. I think they have a mustard that kills nematodes or gets rid of nematodes, but then there's also resistant varieties. It's VFN and the N is nematode. So I would get a nematode resistant variety, and I think it's Arbico, ARBICO, is the organic insectary where you can buy insects that will attack. And I think he's had fairly good luck with getting the nematodes that eat the bad nematodes.
Have you used Rincon Vitova for nematodes and all that? That's the one that I know Randy from Boost Compost, the biodynamics, he recommends getting all the beneficial nematodes from them. But I've never used them, but their catalogs, the older catalogs, used to be super helpful. They don't do them anymore, I don't think. But they have like hundreds of different varieties of predatory insects.
Yeah,
like beneficials and things like that.
Yeah. I would Google, beneficial nematode and get somebody that looks good.
Yeah, and then get something for this area, because you don't want to introduce like a non-native nematode and then all of a sudden you have a different problem than the problem you're trying to solve. So
yeah,
I don't know if the research is that good yet on it.
Yeah, I'd probably go to UCIPM and see what they say. He's in a raised bed, so I don't know why he got them.
Yeah, who knows?
Alrighty, well, I think that's pretty much all the questions for today. Do you want to share anything, closing remarks with everybody for the class?
Have fun. I mean, tomatoes are, in spite of what most of this class was focusing on, this is my first time with a potentially serious disease in part of one field. I've been growing tomatoes for years and years without issue or problem. So anyway, I just don't want to scare anybody off. They're not scary. Just keep trying.
And Lisa, will you give us an update next class?
Yeah, I'm sending it off Thursday. I'm sending it off tomorrow to the lab. And I think they have a 3 to 5 day turnaround. So I know I'm on pins and needles to figure this out, but I do, what I'm going to do is the back-to-back broccoli and then probably grow beans or corn and then back-to-back broccoli again. And I think I can bring my load down. If it is verticillium.
Yeah, I just say tomatoes are worth growing. You
Yeah.
know, even if you run into some issues, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's fun, and you know, just have fun with it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so very much.
Thank
Fantastic
you.
class as always.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
See you
See
later.
you, everyone.